Hi everyone. Welcome to another online CTOs in London. One day I'm sure we'll get back to hosting these in person. One day probably in the distant future, but we'll see. Today we're joined by Paul Whiteside. He's over 25 years experienced CTO and transformation specialist. He's going to be talking to us today about the importance of digital value creation and planning. So yeah, just a real short intro, but as usual, questions at the end, use the raise hand button or the chat function. Over to you, Paul.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to do a quick bit of fiddling around here and share screen. I need somebody to let me be able to do that actually.
Sorry, I'll do that. Okay. There we go. You should be the host now, Paul, so you can do that.
Excellent. Can you see it?
Yep.
Yep. Great. Okay. So yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, thanks for coming. It's a really hot day and not the best day to be sitting inside, I'm sure. But thanks for coming. I've been looking forward to giving this presentation, and it's about something that I feel is becoming really important in digital transformation. So I will get into it. About me. So as Matt said, I'm a CTO and a change and transformation person. Doing this for about 25 years, and I have a classical coding background and moved up through development, team leadership roles, development manager, architecture roles, and eventually into more senior roles, head of level roles and CTO level roles. And for the last 10 years, I've been a contractor. Just doing more of this kind of work, and it's been a very interesting time to be in digital. I think over the last 10 years, everyone's been talking endlessly about digital, but maybe not actually doing it as much as they purport to be. And of course now with COVID happening, that's become a bit of a crunch. So there is a way through this for companies, and it's a different kind of thinking and planning around transformation, and it comes out of private equity, and it's called the value creation plan. So a little bit more about me. I tend to think in terms of product and platforms and reusability, and it's a bit of a mantra for me that I like to share with companies that I work with. My other mantra is a bit of a mashup of a well-known phrase of move fast and break things. I firmly believe instead we need to move fast and fix things. So a lot of companies don't have time or money for too much experimentation, but they have a lot to fix. So there is that aspect. There is this that can be done. One of the key things that I'll be pointing out today is that transformation doesn't have to be huge. It isn't all about just strategy. It's about doing, and as you do it, you build capability like fitness, and again, that's where the value creation plan comes in. So if everyone's good, I'll just go on as we go through this. If anyone wants to ask a question, I suppose you could type it into the chat, and I'll try and stop if I see that and address the question. Otherwise, if we get into anything that's a bit meaty, we'll push that out to the end and have a proper discussion about it. Right. So digital value creation, what is it? So right now, businesses are operating in an exceptional environment, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned from private equity about how to get the focus on value and build solid foundations for growth with the digital transformation strategy. And a lot of businesses haven't been approaching digital transformation the right way. There is thinking that it's a program, it's that something that you're going to do, and once you're transformed, you have it over and done with. And it isn't that. To me, the way I've seen it working best is where it becomes continuous, where you're building a capability that makes doing digital things easier for the company. And that's how they're able to get ahead. So in a nutshell, it's finding new ways to add value and create plans that maximize the full potential of a business by building digital capabilities. So one of the first things a digital value creation plan will seek to look at are the sources of value in a company. And for a PE company, they would have made an acquisition on the basis that there's value in a company that can be amplified. And having made the acquisition, they will reshape the company. They will take out some costs. They may invest in things that look like they have positive upside potential. And that's always a bit of a balancing act. And again, it's a different way of looking at things to a company that isn't under private equity. Mind you, the need to do it is still the same, because putting value into your company, while a PE company seeks to get a bigger valuation at the end, a fully owned company that isn't for sale aims to have a more efficient and scalable business at the end, and they're kind of both the same thing. So the sources of value, and I think most people here will be familiar with these. One source of value is in the operating model. And by that, I mean looking across technology and the business and understanding that the people, the various processes and the various pieces of technology or products, if you're in a product company, that need to come together to deliver value. A second source of value is in innovation and discovery of new things that you can implement and trial quite quickly to see if they're going to deliver new value into the company. So here we're looking at things like disruption, which again is an overly used word, although people have been very disrupted, not by digital, but by COVID, and it turned out to be kind of the same thing again. You can innovate on your business model by leveraging some aspects of technology better. This looks like maybe implementing APIs or platforms or data better. It's anything that looks like it can give you a competitive advantage in your market. And commonly, it would be insights and data that are used to do that, so that you're able to benchmark where you are now and where you think you need to be and how you're going to get there. So this is something that I'll cover off in another slide. The third place to look for value is in operations, and this is different from operating model. Operating model implies some quite significant changes. Operations can be operational tuning, and there are a number of quick wins that can be had in operations. And here we're looking at things like efficiencies, cost savings, and delivery reliability. And there's a lot of other things that you can look at as well, but those tend to be the important things. And as an interim, I've gone in, and these have been my immediate day one challenges to look at. And from there, the conversation has turned into a much broader conversation about capability and architecture and product. The next source of value is in building a platform. Lots of companies are going SaaS. Again, this isn't just reserved for product companies. Many retail companies are adopting a platform approach, and they're B2C, and they're looking at marketplaces, and they're looking to B2B models as well. What doesn't apply for retail, though, is the recurring revenue model, which would be more of a B2B thing and subscription based. But there are opportunities for a lot of companies to look at how they can unlock some of these new revenue models and get their hands on new revenue streams through platforms. And then the last area of value is in looking at across the network. And when I say this, I don't mean LinkedIn networks, I mean networks comprising of APIs and interfaces between different companies. So you may decide that you have a strength in a particular area that can be leveraged, and you might want to specialize there and open your services via APIs. And again, we're talking about customers and marketplaces there. So technology transformation is basically understanding your existing and potential customers, what they want, and how you're going to produce it at the right price point to make it profitable, at the right quality to make sure that that person loves what you're selling them. And that sounds like business transformation, but technology transformation is business transformation when it comes to digital. You can't separate them out. And it starts with the customer and it works back. The last thing, and this is something that I'll keep laboring the point on in this presentation, is that it starts immediately and it's continuous and incremental. You know, the idea that you'll run a program and in 3 years you'll be digital, it can't happen. It's got to be more evolutionary than that. Okay. So given that, what are some of the benefits of value creation planning, and you know, why do you need a plan around it? So like any strategic thing, the core benefit is alignment, where you get strategic clarity across your exec team and across tech. And a lot of times where things go wrong is that there isn't clarity across the tech team, especially when it comes to technology. And people who have an operational view or a finance view may have a different view to people who have been doing digital their whole lives and come from product companies. So at that level, getting that alignment and understanding about what these moving parts are and when they're going to happen and what the results are going to be is a really important thing before you start into any kind of transformation. The next benefit that you get is that you can start looking at some of the foundational things. Where are the foundations? And you can do classic things like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And from there, decide what capabilities technology needs and what digital capabilities need to be built to support the business and what it's doing. The third thing is that a value creation plan at heart is a very honest and simple document, but it must have truth in it. It must have truth in it. So what has to go, and a private equity company would be very keen to look into these areas, would be myth busting. Is the Golden Child project really going to be the thing? And you know, hand on heart, honestly, is it going to be the thing? Truth seeking, are there vanity projects knocking around, or are there digital transformation initiatives going on that are just transformation in name with nothing really happening or being delivered at any rate? The last thing that is the benefit of value creation plans are that they're very pragmatic plans, and they begin right now. They believe that they start on day zero, and they look to address any cost savings and low-hanging fruit, whilst at the same time putting down foundations for further change. And you're trying to get a bit of a snowball effect or a virtuous circle. And I'll come to that in another slide. So what is this VCP for, and why are private equity companies so keen on it? The answer to that is that it illustrates that your company has a strategic value trajectory, and it very carefully describes what success looks like and measures your progress against it, and it's aimed to increasing the valuation at exit. The VCP demonstrates you're building a business that has the ability to scale, and that's why it's an interesting acquisition target, because the acquiring business will probably have a large group of customers that it needs to address better, or some business reason to want your company. And if it's presented with something that has a track record of growth and achievement in ticking off the items on this value trajectory, that becomes worth paying a lot of money for. So basically, you're illustrating the journey of how your business is becoming a machine for delivering value. And I don't necessarily like the word machine. I just couldn't find a better one last night when I was putting this together, because it is all about people at the end of the day. So when I think of a better word, expect that to be replaced. And the thing that I'm going to labour in coming slides is this is not just for VC or PE-backed businesses. Having value put into your company is important for all businesses. And being able to demonstrate successes and a trajectory is the very thing that's going to turn on the internal investment taps, which are going to help you along your way. And this is what I was talking about when I said a snowball effect and helping you along your way. You need to create a virtuous circle. And a lot of times when a change program is planned as a big program over 3 years with a beginning and an end, this aspect is completely missing. And a lot of things are digitization as opposed to digital transformation. And you'll see things like SAP implementations and Salesforce implementations being put in, and there's nothing wrong with those systems. I'm actually quite a fan of Salesforce, but in and of itself, it isn't a digital transformation. You've just acquired a good tool that helps, and it can of course put in a foundational piece for how your business is going to change, which is great. But unless you keep going around like this in a virtuous circle every year, getting better and better and stronger, the risk is that you end up in a position where a lot of companies are now, where they have been completely blindsided by COVID. They've realized that everything they were calling digital hasn't quite cut the mustard, and they're having some problems. Other companies have had a bit more luck. They've been more on the ball. They've had a more iterative approach to hardening up and growing capability, and they're doing a bit better, it seems. So it all starts with customer experience. I've put it near the top, although you can start anywhere in this, but to me, it always comes back to the customer. So a good customer experience leads to growth in a customer base, which leads to more revenue, which leads to more investment, which leads to a better product. And a better product gives you lower cost structures. It can give you better quality, and that gives you higher value sales. You know, your cost per customer acquisition may come down, your revenue per customer may go up. And then you go around again and you start looking at it, what to do next. How am I going to make the customer experience even better? And you go around and around like this. And this is a continual thing. It's not a program. So change and transformation needs to be an operational aspect of a company that's a digital company. And if you look over on the right, the things that drive valuation are tiered. So a raw startup might have some customers only, and you know, for the sake of having identified some customers and having an idea, it can have a valuation, probably not a big one. But as it grows, it gets staff and it gets systems in place, and you're starting to build software and solutions. And as it grows further, those turn into products. And this is a difficult stage for startups, and it's actually a difficult stage for traditional businesses as well, as getting to product thinking. When you get really good at product, that turns into distribution, and there we're talking about platforms and networks. And when you get really good at that, the things that matter are brand. But the thing that really gives you the best valuation is a demonstrable ability to be able to scale. And if you get that far in your startup, you can expect investors to start turning on the taps with large funding rounds. Now, with companies that aren't invested or self-invested, you know, this still applies. You know, getting to a point where you feel your business can scale and grow should be a very exciting thing inside a company, and it should be something that can be felt by people at all levels. That yes, we are all about scale. We're going to get big. So the virtuous circle and the valuation multiplier stack on the right. Really important when it comes to the VCP. But there are some challenges at the minute, and I've mentioned a couple of them. The first is that COVID has been something that came out of the blue, and you can't describe it as digital disruption. It's more than that. It's disrupted everything. But companies that were digital in nature had a more inherent ability to be able to cope with it. But it's caught a lot of businesses off guard, and it's identified weaknesses in companies' digital abilities. And these weaknesses have maybe been obvious for years and unaddressed. You know, people talking about digital transformation isn't anything new, but I think there have been a lot of half-hearted transformation efforts, or perhaps things got too complex in terms of running as a program as opposed to establishing digital as a culture. The second thing is that that's meant that lots of transformation work, meaning projects, because everything seems to count as transformation at the minute, but lots of transformation work has been postponed or cancelled. And for some companies, it's just too late to transform. The gap's widened, and it's a really difficult situation, and there's winners and losers. The third obstacle is that there's a belief that transformation needs to be huge and expensive, and you need 4 program managers and 100 people on it. And this is where, to me, it starts going wrong. You know, from time to time, you will be doing something complex like putting in Salesforce. But mostly it's got to become a digital culture where people understand what digital means, and they bite off small pieces, and those small pieces follow the direction set in the value creation plan. The last thing is the focus on the immediate situation, by doubling down even harder on what business always did. And that doesn't seem to be working out very well for quite a lot of companies at the minute, sadly. Now there's an understanding that cash is king, meaning cash flow is important, and it's of course important. But that combined with point number 2, that transformation can start now and doesn't have to be a huge program of work. You can adopt some small habits right now, and you can start putting down some foundations and coming through this a lot better. So that's why VCP will always focus on the core business and some of the immediate low-hanging fruits and imminent problems first before anything else. Okay. As I mentioned, a lot of businesses are in an emergency situation, and the VCP can address some items pretty much straight away. But it does force a lot of questions on people, and these might seem like big things, but actually now is a very good time to act on them, because there's a will for companies to help each other, and it just simply has to be done. So what am I talking about here? And this isn't a definitive list of questions. These are just questions you can ask in the early days as you're beginning to build your VCP. So what should my supplier relationships be? How many permanent people, how many contractors, which suppliers do I go with? Should I use a partnership model? Which projects are we getting the most value out of? Those kind of things all need to be looked up. Do we have the right team models? There's nothing like a crisis to realize that a cross-functional hit squad is needed. And I think we've all been in companies where a project has gone sour, and this is what needed to happen. And when it did happen, things turned around without a lot of the complexity that you normally find. And adopting that has long-term benefits. You know, this is one of the digital ways of working and a digital mindset. Another question you could ask is about your product portfolio, and how do we weed out underperforming products and offering, get rid of them? How do we focus and bolster things that are making money at the minute? And how do we ensure, if we're short on funds, that we're spending what we have, what we can spend in the right places? And the thing about this is it's really important at the minute because if you don't do it, an administrator may end up coming in, and that's what they will have to start looking at doing. So, or a turnaround company or something like that. Another question maybe, is our architecture keeping us back? And due to lack of investment and keeping technology estates up to date, nearly every company I know of has this problem, that architecture has been very carefully planned, and yet still is developed to the stage where it's all welded together with very little flexibility, and it's very difficult to build things. So is this the time then to maybe begin thinking different? I've spoken to some architects and groups recently about more organic ways of doing things, about ecosystem architecture. And these are really interesting ideas in a digital context. So maybe it's time to think about breaking some rules in an emergency to exploit opportunities quickly. And I'm not saying simplify everything. Things can be simple but wrong, or they can be complex but right. But you need to look at this urgently. What's in the middle? What am I going to do? What's the first bit of my VCP going to look like? And there are a whole lot of other questions you can ask. It depends on your business. But again, these are the first steps toward building long-term digital culture and transformation. So a really important thing in a VCP is honesty, and what's called a bias for action. There's no time to hang around at the minute. You need some demonstrable tick boxes about what you're doing and why it's value, and how you're moving along with it. And to do that, you need to really assess honestly, where are we now? Okay, and this is a hard thing because you're never really where you think you are until a crisis happens. Another thing is, where do we need to be? And maybe this is a hard question because it's not where do we need to be as in where do we think we were doing against our competitors at the end of last year. From here right now today, where do we need to be by Christmas or Q1 next year? And it has to be quite a vision. It has to be accurate. It can't be a hallucination. It can't be a rebadging of something that's been bandied around the business forever. It really needs a hard looking at. Can we get there from here? This is the killer question. Can we get there from here? And if it's a no, you need to go back and do it again. Or you start thinking about, well, what can we do instead? And you go into a SWOT analysis and you look at strengths and weaknesses and opportunities, but not in the traditional business term, in terms of your architectural stack, in terms of the products and vendors that you're using, all of those things. What's holding you back? Where is there an opportunity? How can I get going fast on something? And of course, in all of this, I was advised by somebody very senior at Deloitte that a good way to think of this is, how do we know what we're about, and how do we know what we want to be famous for? And a lot of companies, unfortunately, may be being famous for things and they don't want to be remembered for that. So this is all part of devising the value creation plan. There's a backstory that goes along with it. So those are most of the things that go into it. But the important thing is that we immediately start picking off low-hanging fruit, making some progress, and demonstrating a success trajectory. We don't get into program planning hell and get stuck. That's not what a VCP is all about. Okay, so what is it for? And I've covered some of this. It's for knowing if your plan is working. Again, this is something that you're going to present when you want to sell your company, that yes, we do have the right team, we do have the right strategy, our profits are up, we're following this strategy, we're ticking the boxes, that we're growing, and it's working. That becomes very attractive for acquisition at that point. Was our SWOT right? Are our assumptions correct? And the most important one for me is, and I've seen it a lot, are we in danger? Are we flying off course on poor instrumentation? And I've put this little picture in here on the right that I've liked for a long time. And I use it when I'm talking about measurements and KPIs and OKRs and things. If they aren't right and you're just flying by metrics, you can get into the situation of these pilots here where they're so convinced they're flying high from looking at the dials, they don't see the mountain that's right in front of them. And, you know, this really is a problem sometimes. So instead, the value creation plan seeks to avoid that. And it shows that we're moving the business into growth and that we're following a successful strategy to do that. So even if you're not up for acquisition or under external investment, this is extremely valuable. So I'm just getting towards the end stages of the deck now, but I have to stress, and I've stressed it a few times and I can't stress it enough, that it's not just for private equity companies. It's a really valuable tool that private equity will use to help shape a business. And I know there are some private equity horror stories, but you know, there are a lot of good ones out there that are a lot more about value than they are about bottom line. And they understand, you know, what is needed to build out that value in the long run. So PE is all about realizing short-term benefits, eliminating no-value activities, and allow the redirection of funds into longer-term value creation to increase profits and improve its economic performance, make it attractive to sell. And this is all about putting in the foundations for future growth and profitability. But it's for any business. It's just good, solid business. And from a technology and digital point of view, it really helps to align business and digital. And a digital company really needs that. They need to be one and the same thing. So any business that's currently in need of rapid change and a return to economic health can undertake the same exercise and transform itself into a scalable business or into a platform business or whatever it is that kind of business you need to be a digital business. So key takeaways. You've heard it before. I'll just say it one more time and then I'll stop saying it. Yeah, not just for private equity. It's about building capabilities that enables business scale. It's got to be honest, accurate, and realistic given where you are now. It's got to create the virtuous circle, the snowball effect. It's got to up your valuation as you go through those valuation steps on the hierarchy. It's a realistic plan that starts right now. It's based on the facts that small increments lead to big successes. Small increments now are foundations. When you have the big foundations, you can do the big stuff later. So it's a key component of any turnaround strategy. And it should be a really high priority for any company right now that's looking around and wondering what on earth it's going to do about transformation, isn't able to spend a lot of money on something huge and really needs to get going quick. This is the way to go. So we've reached the end. So thank you for bearing with me, and I'm opening it up to questions here. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Paul. Thanks for that. Very insightful. Yeah, if anyone's got any questions, use the raise hand button and I'll introduce you. Matt Miller has a question. Go on, Matt.
Yeah, hi, Paul. And this is all music to my ears. And
sorry, that's extremely quiet. I can't.
So can you hear me now?
That's a bit better. Yeah.
Yeah. Oops. Can you hear me?
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, this is all music to my ears, Paul. And I've really been looking for not just a CTO, and this is the key point, but a COO or even a CIO that's sort of singing to the song sheet. And that's what worries me about this, is that we're playing to an audience of CTOs, interim CTOs today, I presume, and thanks to Matt for bringing this group together. But as an enterprise architect myself, or solutions architect for that matter, I've been finding myself having to convince COOs and group CIOs about this sort of stuff lately, and including some who've been through the whole private equity sort of life cycle, if that's the word, or transformation. So what is the plan to take this to that wider audience? How are you necessarily targeting that audience, and what can CTOs, interim CTOs, do to help convince the COOs and CIOs that they need to focus on this as much as the technology side?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know what? Really, it starts with the CEO of a company,
Yes.
and it starts with the board. And a lot of times, the CTO is badged as the technology guy, and sometimes doesn't get on with the rest of the board as well as they should. And that boils down to culture. But some companies do have a culture where a COO is very digital. I've worked with chief commercial officers that really get this. They won't go out and sell just anything. They want to sell to roadmap. They want to build a case. They want to market it. They want to build up a backstory around it. And I've also worked with some really good COOs who really get this as well. Because what a lot of this about is starting small, getting teams on jobs, getting to an OPEX funding model, and getting away from the need to ramp up and down, and building a platform that has more stable financial characteristics over time. And I've also met CFOs who get that as well. So now I think those tend to be in small to medium companies, not maybe so much in big companies. But I've been to talks, given by the founders of ASOS. One of the reasons that they were able to make it a success is because they did have digitally minded CEOs and commercial people in the boardroom at the top. And it was possible for CTOs and CIOs to help them a lot better than what may be possible in a more traditional company.
Yeah, thanks. I think that sort of sums up the fact that this is not just for CTOs. This is a much broader audience that this is targeted at, and that maybe we need to try and go target the CEO, if not whoever the CEO designates as the right person to talk to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of education to do as well, and not necessarily education about pure technology, but some of these people won't be familiar with some of the business models that come with a platform company or a digital company. So trying to help with that, and I would never pretend to be a finance expert, of course, so you have to be careful with it, but it's always good to talk and ask questions, especially of CFOs, about how they see things.
Yeah, it just depends on whether the CFO is a true CFO or whether they're really more of a director of financial operations or even a FD, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Just can I ask another question? Sorry, I don't know if this someone else. Just
Okay.
about all the VCs, and I'm really up for a good acronym. But you've got Virtuous Circle. You've got value creation plan, which is really the essence of what this is about, and the importance of a value creation plan. But there's another VC which has been coming up for me, and it seems to be the story of my contracting life, and that's the vicious cycle. And I think, interestingly, what you've made me aware of is that you've got one VC playing off against another, but what you need to stick with the right VC, which is the virtuous circle, is have that value creation plan. Could that be right? And so award yourself the right VC, if you pardon the pun.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a very difficult translation. If you're stirring your coffee to the left and you stop and suddenly start stirring it to the right, half your coffee jumps out. And I've seen that happening when you try and, make change happen too quickly. And, a lot of people would get fed up and go. And it is a tricky thing to turn around, but a lot of people will see some of the vicious circles that happen, and sometimes the root problems of those vicious circles can be way outside what a CTO should be expected to deal with. It can come from maybe a very powerful salesperson who likes to do off the cuff requirements with the customer, and then over the wall it into an engineering team who's going to build it for him. Which can never, have the same economic potential as understanding what a broader group of customers needs and building that and marketing it and taking it to market. So it's a culture change, and if everybody knows that's the very difficult kind of change to make happen.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Matt. Do we have any other questions from anyone else? Feel free to jump in.
Hi there. Hi, it's Rashmi. Thank you, Paul. It's been really insightful.
Thanks, Rashmi.
I really like the fact where you mentioned that it's really a culture. It shouldn't be a program which is an end-all, start-all, end-all sort of a thing. And it's almost, and what you've said along with Matt as well, it's you need everybody on board, CEO, the boards, and everybody, CTOs, CEOs, all of them together. It's almost like an enabler to kind of get the company to achieve its goals, really. On the topic of quick wins, have you seen anything that's kind of something that jumps out across the board, something that regularly features as something that should be done as a first step, for example?
There are all sorts of things. Yeah, so a lot of times when I've gone on an interim engagement, one thing that's a common problem is poor definition of roles. And nobody seems to understand why an engineering manager is different from a delivery manager. And the engineering managers are running around at the behest of delivery people, scrambling all the time. And that isn't the job. It's a very tough job being an engineering manager, because you need to be a counterbalance, and you need to bring that umbrella. Now, it's not saying no to everything, of course, but the job of an engineering manager is to build capabilities that make the delivery easy in the long run. And that's what makes it such a tough role. And when you get a really good one, they're able to call out which bits of tech debt exist, what needs fixed straight away. And sometimes when you pair somebody like that up with a really good product owner, and you get a richer product backlog that's got both tech debt and features in it, that's another really important quick win. And at the beginning, it looks like you've slowed down because you're not getting as many features out, but you end up not having to fix so many bad features, so you do get more done. It's like the frustrating sign on the motorway that makes you go 50 miles an hour, but you're actually going to get there quicker. So that's the engineering manager. So that's a common one. But there's a whole lot of stuff, I could just talk endlessly about that. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. I mean, having worn both hats, I totally understand and resonate with that. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. And of course, the tech debt one is another big one. All companies have it. Very few companies see the benefit of fixing it until it's broken, and then they hire someone to fix quality, and they think that means that you need lots of testers, but you already know it's broken. Why do you need lots of testers? So there are things like that. There's engineering's a long-term thing, digital's a long-term thing, and but you can't plan it as a long-term program. You just have to start now and pick your wins and keep going and build the culture, build the capability, and over time you get teams and people and platforms that are much better and fitter for purpose. So and I've been, I suppose, as an interim, you don't get to see things through for many years. You're there for maybe a year and a half. So my job has been to educate, turn a few things around, and of course support delivery and help with quality problems. But I have managed to help people see that quality starts with it goes through everything. It's not just about the testing that happens at the end. So
absolutely. Thank you.
Andy Flack here. Question for you. Which wheel do you think comes off first? Because basically you've been saying that you've got to have the buy-in of the rest of the board into this process. Which do you reckon is the one that is most likely to come on unhitched first?
Which aspect of the...
Which part of the company, which of the other C's is most likely to be the one that starts to?
Oh, right. Well, I think at the minute, the immediate pressure is on the CFO and the CEO. The CEO is going to be finding business development extremely difficult, and the CFO is going to be worried about cash and not interested in spending any money anywhere. So anything that you present to him that looks like spend is going to it's not going to land. He probably, or she, sorry, isn't going to be able to get their head around your longer term thinking. So the longer term thinking is required, but it's longer term thinking that isn't like a 3-year plan with lots of boxes that you must tick. It's a sort of a roadmap with a 3-month plan with boxes that you must tick. And if you start getting those 3-month things sorted out for the CFO without even having to have any conversations about money, and you're able to present the VCP that shows the boxes ticked and shows the direction of travel, you can get a situation where that they will start listening. And I did have this a few jobs ago where I worked at Collinson Group, and it was a very big team. It was a centralized team. It was a resource pool, and it was a real bottleneck trying to get projects, trying to get resources onto projects was a huge issue, and people were landing onto projects with no domain experience. Quality was terrible. There was all sorts of things happening. And through conversations, with the CFO, we realized that to be able to do the transformation, the cross-charging model had to change. And he was willing to tackle that, the cross-charging model. And he had a real rat's nest to sort out, but he was up for it. He was up for it. So that was a really good thing, a really good thing. So we could only go so far with the technology transformation. We essentially did a restructuring of the shared service, and it was a group company. So we built smaller specialized IT functions in each group. And then we had an enablement function running across it, setting standards and offering support. So that was the model we wanted. And we did that, but we couldn't go further until the cross-charging issues were sorted out, and that really was going to be a long project. So, but they were definitely up for tackling that bull by the horns, though. So that was a good thing.
Yeah.
Thanks, Matt. Did you have another question, or was that your hand up?
Yeah, I did. It was just it was sort of again picking up on Rashmi's question in actual fact, and I'm sure as CTOs you probably pick up on things at a different level, because I come in as a sort of interim enterprise architect, come solution architect. So I often, my first step is picking up on in recent times has been current state assessments. With what we can do with a system that, or a solution that isn't performing, or even a process that isn't working. But then I'll start to see the bigger picture, and that's where things get tricky, because that's where the politics kicks in, because they somehow want you to fix the broken solution or process, but the problem is it's the overall thing is broken. So where can we perhaps introduce someone like Paul with looking at the overall value creation, or even just looking at enterprise architecture as a per se, and how that's enabling the business to do what it needs to do, to use another word that Rashmi picked up. How do we escalate, for want of a term, from where we've come in at to get these good things happening? That seems to be a challenge I come up against time and again. I don't know if you've had to deal with that, Paul, or others on the call have had to deal with that.
I think, well, yeah, I mean, I can open up to everyone, but for me, that can be well, it used to be a big frustration. And then I kind of learned that I can't fix everything as a CTO. I have to know some things that I can fix and some things that I can't, and focus on things that look like they might be doors that will swing open more easily. Earlier in my career, I did bash my head against doors until I was seeing stars and wondered, why does nobody get agile? So that just wasn't working. So you do have to know your place, and ultimately it's for senior board members to be responsible, and you can pitch in, but like any team you're going to find yourself in, you can't be the sole maverick running all over the pitch yourself, and you need to, sometimes you need to acquiesce, and sometimes you need to influence, and sometimes sadly it just isn't going to go your way, and you have to try something that's a little bit less adventurous, you know. But you can be a bit like a naughty kid as well, though, and you know, even when you acquiesce, they know you're going to be jumping up and down on the sofa in about half an hour, so you know, they get used to technology people doing that, I guess. So there's that. But I don't know if anyone else has similar experiences.
I've had the issue before where you've actually had to prove that something is really broken. I've even had meetings where we've discussed, well, you know, if we fix this at the moment, then we'll be stuck with it. If we just let it break a bit more, then maybe then they'll actually realize that we really need to change it and replace it with something else. So I think there is an issue with regards to good enough and whether you should actually be replacing something, or whether it's still working well enough for them to be able to ignore that as a problem and get on with the next thing.
I've had those kind of things. Trying to get rid of something that was written in Adobe Flash was one of those. That was solved by the CFO by finding a lot of developers from Infosys who apparently were really good at it. Although they turned out to be not really good at it, but we had to go around the houses on that one. But we did end up rewriting that in Angular at the time. But unfortunately, that was an equal world of pain. But there you go. So yeah, you do get those prove it things at times, and of course there's the willingness of business to sort of drive the broken car until it breaks, and they think that the CTO is the mechanic who can jump out at the side of the M4 and get you back on the road again. And sometimes as a CTO, you end up going round and around with that. It's not the best place to be when you're just seen as the fixer-uppers. So
maybe we need to form more of an alliance. I'm starting because between CTOs and architects, because how architects handle it, if it's assuming they've got an architecture practice of any sort of level of maturity at all, is I've been handling it through architecture risk and having to resolve technical debt. But you still have to be able to take some time to figure out how that enterprise is meant to fit together. Before you call him Scotty, if you pardon the Star Trek pun, and often, I've had situations where the CTO is going, well, why didn't you tell me about that earlier? But the fact is, you don't even have the governance model to even necessarily talk directly to the CTO in some cases, which is bizarre. So I was sort of wondering whether we should somehow start to form practice models outside of any engagement to say, this is what you need to have as a minimum. This is where an architect engages with the CTO. This is how we manage risk, either at an architecture level, a business level, or a project level. In fact, risk is the thing I think is missing from your presentation, because I think that's the offset. There's either you go with this value creation or you accept a certain amount of risk, but it's business risk as opposed to necessary architecture risk or project risk. And I think there's a lack of understanding of risk. And that's the other big bugbear of mine in recent times.
Yeah. That's another reason. Sometimes there's no way around doing a big integration of something that you need. But for private equity, a lot of companies in their portfolio are going to be SMEs, so they're risk averse about doing things like that. It has to be small and tight because they can't have a big thing going wrong. It's existential for an SME, whereas in a big company, it's not great, but the worst that happens is maybe somebody gets fired. But a small company, it goes wrong, everybody gets fired. So you do need the iterative and evolutionary process behind it. And I think one thing that has helped me is to I've aligned to a couple of very good CFOs in the past who, although they didn't get architecture, they are probably the most technically minded people in the boardroom. They come from a technical discipline where getting it wrong matters, just like us, and they can manage quite large teams. And beyond what you see day to day, there's an awful lot going on in the background, an awful lot of drudge, that's just like IT, an awful lot of moving parts, that's just like IT. So, I find, having honest chats with CFOs about basically how messy and horrible everything is can sometimes work quite well. And you realize that there are some commonalities. And then, of course, for architecture, that they might begin realizing that, okay, there's a big complicated thing there and I don't really have any view of it, just like Paul doesn't have any view of my big complicated financial team. So you can do those kind of things.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
Cheers.
Anyone else have any other questions? Damilola?
Hi, good afternoon, guys. I think it's a great presentation, Paul.
Cool.
I think the thing for me that I think often is missing is this kind of sort of obsession with the user needs. I kind of feel like whilst it's good to kind of have a sort of very sort of strong technical focus, and there's the whole thing around persuasion with, the board, getting them to sort of buy ideas and consider sort of new ideas, new approaches. I do subscribe to the agile iterative approach, by the way. I think that it's all good, having kind of this fancy piece of tech, this fancy solution. But if the users, don't want it, then it's like, well, kind of, where's the value? So I do think there is something about how we align kind of user needs, end user needs, those actually using things, like looking at how we align stronger, the workshops that happened, the user research that's happened, and integrate that, into the actual thing. But I'd go a step further and say that it's not just necessarily end users, like, the users using, some sort of widget or whatever. It's actually looking at things slightly more holistically, considering all stakeholders. And to even get to that stage, you need to map the stakeholders, you need to identify them, you need to know which ones are key, and then integrate their perspective about the thing into, the actual product or service, whatever the product is. So I tend to see that missing, and I think there's a huge opportunity to really just, begin to kind of really look at and think more from the pains and the problems that the users are having. Because I think, if you're able to demonstrate that, through some sort of video or some sort of thing, people can begin to understand better, how it adds value. So that's just kind of my perspective on it. And I think Agile helps with that as well. So I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, having that value ethos that you mentioned, is important, and it does all start with the customer and comes back. But I think sometimes the mistake is that's at the feature level, and there's a misunderstanding about what large groups of customers need and want. And sometimes it isn't just the customer. If you're in a B2B business, your customer is another business, or a group of businesses and stuff like that. So there's a different way of approaching that kind of thing. But start with the customer and work back. But getting everybody to understand the customer domain, as you mentioned, is really, really important. And something that happens quite a lot is that isn't understood well, and things go wrong. But over many years, you know, when I've been sort of coming through my career, we were always told we've got to become more and more like the business in our thinking. And I think most of us have probably worked very hard at that and come to a point of realizing that we are talking good business practice. We're just talking about it in a digital way. And you know, one of the problems is that we don't have that many digital boards, and we don't have enough skills in the boardroom other than the CTO to do digital. So that's a bit of a frustration. You know, I think technology has come a long way in aligning to business, but to be a digital company, the business has to align to technology as well, and you know, it can't be just a one-way street. That has to happen. So I think, you know, we sort of need to hold out a palm to each other and help each other out a bit, because I think the realization that hasn't happened is now apparent, and it's really needed urgently.
Right, thanks. Any other questions at all from anyone? No, okay. Well, if there's no other questions, then we'll leave it there. Thanks again, Paul. Really good, really insightful. I'll be sharing a link to the recording later this afternoon for anyone that missed the start or wants to watch it again. Thanks to everyone who dialed in as well. Hope you all found it useful, enjoyed it. Have a great weekend, enjoy the sun, and see you all next time.
Lovely. Okay, thanks a lot for having me. Bye now.
Bye.
Thank you.